I'm Ascent Hyperion, and this is a special miniature episode of Let's Argue. Let's Argue is a series where I engage in your hot Halo takes, your crazy ideas, and your normal opinions. I agree or disagree and explain why. But in today's special miniature episode of Let's Argue, I want to focus on one particular topic. In fact, one particular question. Is the Halo franchise meant to be competitive or casual? This topic, this idea, this question has really risen to prominence in the Halo community over the last several months here, but really kind of since the birth of Halo Infinite, a game that launched with a very high focus on competitive play. Now, this topic is a little tricky because when you say competitive or casual gameplay, to some people it implies different things. As it pertains to Halo, when I say the word competitive in this video, I am talking more specifically about esports or anything related to it. It could be ranked gameplay as well. When we talk about casual, I'm talking about unranked gameplay, generic match-made modes, in addition to things like custom games and Forge and everything else that isn't a standard red versus blue team type of experience. You know what I'm saying, right? It's no secret to anyone that Halo Infinite is a game that seems highly focused on catering towards competitive play and esports, as 343 has made it pretty clear that they are highly interested in listening to and acting upon the feedback of esports players, whether it be in the general sense or select feedback groups. Part of the problem with this is that now many casual players of the game, the general Halo fanbase, are starting to feel ostracized by 343 as their own feedback and interests aren't being heard and often have been in conflict to what esports players are asking for. So it leads to the obvious question being, if 343 has to choose one side to cater to, which side should it be? And one way you can approach that question is by asking, well, what is Halo supposed to be, competitive or casual? I posted this very same question on both Twitter and YouTube. I asked, is Halo a competitive game with a casual side, or is it a casual game with a competitive side? The resounding response on both polls, with numbers in the thousands, said that Halo is a casual shooter with a competitive side. But what does that mean? Well, I think any Halo player kind of understands this. Halo, while it does have its matchmaking and its sweaty times, it is also filled up with casual experiences. Custom games like Infection or Griffball are far from generically competitive, right? However, they exist in the matchmaker as part of what would be the core game experience. And on the note of custom games, that has been a very essential part in the identity of Halo. Nobody can take away the importance of custom games and Forge in the Halo experience. And two of Halo's most popular titles, Halo 3 and Halo Reach, had insane fan bases built just on the custom games alone. Halo's applicability for custom games and Forge also opened up to a lot more casual and social modes, whether it be hangouts, assassination towers, clans, roleplays, machinima. There is a very large non-competitive component to Halo, and it'd be fair to assert that despite being a game that has Team Slayer or free-for-all modes, a lot of it is comprised of this casual experience. To that same effect, Halo is a franchise with a very rich competitive history, with Halo 2 being an esport classic of the era, and esports going through MLG and HCS continuing over 15 years of Halo's lifespan. This is something that hundreds of thousands of people seem to enjoy. It generates revenue both for content creators, players, and I'd imagine 343, the creators of Halo, which then I would hope is pumped back into the development of the game. It's apparent to me that Infinite is a game extremely obsessed with its competitive scene. However, that sandbox is getting cannibalized by feedback from pro players, who continue to GA, which is a gentleman's agreement, to change the landscape of Halo. Now, we make fun of this a lot in Halo Infinite with GAs, but it's kind of commonplace for pro play, MLG, HCS, etc. They've been modifying the rules of the game since they could start modifying the rules of the game. The big difference, and this is where we really start to get in the conversation here, is that they want their modifications to Halo that used to be their little subset of thing to now be the full game experience. Is that the slippery slope? And that's where a lot of players are recently drawing the line. Why do you have to be affected by pro players' input? What if you, the general Halo player, thought Halo Infinite was fine and didn't need any changes with pro player input? That's where we're getting it. There were a couple really interesting comments both on YouTube and on Twitter. One comment in particular is very interesting that I saw on Twitter and said that Halo is casual with a competitive side as per the original designer's intent, saying that Halo was never intended to be an esport, to be a hyper-competitive game. I would maybe wager that's true based on the onus that competitive play as we know it in the modern day did not exist 20 years ago, right? The esports scene as we have it today didn't exist at Halo's conception. So how could the developers had any perception or any planning to make that happen? Now, think about something like this. In the development of Halo 2, Bungie made the conscious choice to make the Halo 2 multiplayer into something they felt would be a thriving success on the Xbox Live platform. To do that, they implemented things that at the time were considered far more competitive. And the Halo fans at that time were worried that Halo's multiplayer was going to go away from the kind of goofy couch co-op environment that it had been in into something that was far more serious, and they weren't a fan. And ultimately, those fans who had that fear were correct. Halo did become more competitive. And there were a couple comments that said something that I'm just going to kind of summarize here. People had said that a good competitive game comes out of a good casual game. You have to think about the era Halo comes from. These days you can get games that are hyper focused and hyper designed for competitive play. Games like Valorant, for example, exist purely for this reason in my eyes. Halo developed a competitive scene because its gameplay, its weapon sandbox, its mechanic sandbox could foster a competitive environment. What many fans might assert these days is that we're starting to lose the plot a little bit. Halo didn't have a good competitive scene because it was naturally competitive. It had a good competitive scene because the game was good. And what made the game good? You could wager part of its devotion to being a little more casual experience, to being a little more arcade and campy. When you start to attack those things, the arcadeness and the campiness and the goofiness, the silliness, the randomness of the Halo gameplay experience, can you still pull out the same quality competitive experience that you had before without damaging the original perception and play of the game? I agree. Halo is a casual game with a competitive side, and while I don't think we have to completely eliminate the competitive side to protect the casual side, I do think we are going down a slippery slope of letting the smaller end of this community control the larger end. Now, someone made a comment saying that the competitive players are actually the most devoted people in the fan base, and I'd be interested to see if you could prove that. I'm not saying that as like an insult or a joke or anything. I wonder if that's true. With all this work to make competitive play, let's call it better in Halo Infinite, is it actually yielding a higher level of commitment out of competitive players? I want to turn the clock back a little bit to Halo 5, right? Halo 5 was a game extremely tuned for competitive play and had a high focus, especially at launch and really throughout, on the competitive experience. Ironically, at the end of the day, the people who stuck with Halo 5 the longest were the people in the casual experiences, the people in the customs browser, the people hanging out at the Sangheili clan hangouts, the clan battles, people doing Assassination Tower. Those were the real most devoted fans, the ones that stuck with it the longest. I'd like to see some type of introspection or proof that competitive players truly are the most dedicated fan base in Halo Infinite, because if ultimately that's the case, maybe they do deserve the platform that 343 is currently giving them. Maybe they do deserve to have the game modified for them kind of at a whim. But if ultimately the casual Halo fan base, the general Halo fan base is still who is carrying the player base in the game, which isn't that large right now to start with, maybe they shouldn't be sidelined. That'll further ostracize the people who are keeping Halo alive, and it's a risky slope, slippery slope for something like HCS or Pro that really is ultimately timed. Eventually it'll come to an end in Halo Infinite, and what will be left? Will there be a Halo that the rest of the fan base still wants to play? What do you think? Is Halo competitive with the casual side, or is it casual with the competitive side? Let me know in the comments below. What should 343 be doing to not just appease one group of these players, but to find some type of middle ground for both of us? Or are they already there and we're not giving them enough credit? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you have not, and until next time, I'll catch y'all later.